Hi, Linda.
Ah, finally. Okay. Well, Chris, thank you for being willing to attend this meeting tonight. For those of you who don't know Chris Mason, he was the Energy and Sustainability Officer for many years, 15 years in Northampton, until he moved on to work for the Green Communities Program as the Western Region liaison person. And welcome, Chris. And we're hoping to learn a lot about the Climate Leader program from you
Great.
tonight.
Great. Well, I'm happy to be here. Happy to share this information and see a few towns. Go ahead and jump on board here. Okay, so I'm using a presentation that I gave to Ashfield back in April, just because it happened to have everything that you guys are looking for, plus more probably. So the difference here, so I'm going to give you an overview of the Climate Leader Communities program. And then the next three are actually pieces of the Climate Leaders program. So decarbonization commitment and roadmap, zero emission vehicle first policy, and specialized stretch code. The last one, I went into it in depth for Ashfield, and I don't think I will need to do that here because you guys have already, Northampton has already adopted it. And actually Amherst has adopted it as well. So
Right.
Those that ones probably don't have to cover too much. Okay, to put some.
Your
Yes.
assessment is that our Northampton's and Amherst's plan is good enough to qualify that one step of being.
Oh no, I wasn't talking about the plan. I was talking about adopting the stretch code in that case.
Okay, because that's one of the criteria for becoming a climate community.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Let's see, back up.
My only question was whether Northampton and Amherst have met that criteria.
So the bottom right down here, specialized stretch code.
Right.
They both have adopted that one.
Right. So that's.
Yep. All right. So we can kind of go back to 2008 when the Global Warming Solutions Act was passed, which started the Green Communities Program. And at that point, it was, the state was very focused on energy efficiency, cost-effective energy efficiency. And over the decade or so since then, or more than that, the state has gradually shifted. And in 2021, when we signed the Climate Act, that really made a shift because it really refocused from energy efficiency to climate reduction. And that's been happening at the state level. It's been happening at local levels. It's been happening through the Green Communities grants, where we're looking more and more at greenhouse gas reductions as opposed to just energy efficiency. The two are really big overlap, but they're not the same. And it's really important that we're aiming for what we're actually looking for, which is greenhouse gas reductions. So the Climate Act signed in 2021, and then the carbon emissions reduction plan set actual goals for the state to be carbon neutral by 2050. And that becomes one of the criteria as well. Some of the program benefits here builds on the success of the Green Communities program, which worked really well involving all the communities. It aligns the resources more with climate reduction, greenhouse gas reduction, as opposed to energy efficiency. It's got opportunities, you'll see it has some opportunities to actually engage communities more than the Green Communities program might do. It encourages adoption of climate and clean energy policies and programs. You have to adopt these policies and programs to become a climate leader. And you may even want to go farther as part of the program. And again, expands opportunities for community engagements.
Chris, I had two things now. Go back one slide, please.
Sure.
I'm a acronym fanatic. What's EEA?
Energy and Environmental Affairs.
Thank you. And the original question was, I know this, you just described that the state has made a shift. Do you have any data on how close we came as a state to achieving the energy conservation goals?
I don't, do you mean like for per towns?
Either
Or,
way, yeah, either way.
so those goals haven't really gone away. They've just, it's just kind of refocusing. Give you an example, kind of an obvious. So you have an old boiler that's going away, or maybe it's getting near the end of life of a boiler, and you're going to make a decision on what you're going to do. Energy efficiency might say, "Oh, great! I'm going to get rid of the old oil boiler, and I've got a gas line, so I'm going to put in natural gas. I'm going to high efficiency gas boiler, and that's energy efficiency.
Mhm.
Doesn't get rid of climate. Doesn't really help you that much on climate change.
Okay.
Now, the new decision would be to switch over to air source heat pumps, which probably means you need to prepare that building in advance by really weatherizing it and dropping the load as much as you can, maybe energy recovery ventilation, other methods. So it really changes what your response is, but you're still doing energy efficiency. It's just now you're aiming it at greenhouse gas emissions. So you're making sure you get that piece in there as well.
That helps a lot. Yeah. So if I understand correctly, this climate leader community maintains the green community's criteria, but then morphs it a little bit and adds a layer on top of that that says, well, you want to be efficient, but you also want to address greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a modified criteria for your choices.
Right. You won't stop being a green community. That actually, as I move along, you'll see that actually is needed.
Great. Thanks.
So the requirements for certification, the first thing is you must be existing green community in good standing. So you still, you must be a green community, have all your annual reports, information uploaded, make sure you're not, doing something that goes against any of your policies, your zoning, your as of rights citing, etc. Then the community must establish or maintain a local advisory group, a green community. So Amherst and Northampton both have those. The NESC, and I'm not sure what it's called in Amherst. Then the community needs to commit to municipal decarbonization by 2050. And Amherst and Northampton might very well have that already. So you'd have to look at your plans and see if you actually have made that commitment. I believe Northampton has.
Yes.
Yeah, and so you'd have to argue to us that your existing plan already meets that, and I think that probably wouldn't be that hard of an argument to make. And then formulate a roadmap for implementation. That actually should almost be a different bullet here. And a roadmap for implementation is really, really broad. It's kind of saying, these are the buildings you should be working on first. These are the kind of things that you should be looking at for these different buildings. And you're going to have to go into much more detail when you implement them. And the state is offering, the DOER is offering assistance of a grant of services to help communities develop a roadmap. And that program opportunity notice went out earlier this year, and we selected a bunch of communities. Northampton or Amherst, neither Northampton or Amherst applied for that. And it could be that's the plans you're putting in place, what Ben's going to be doing in Northampton. He may be might be what he's basically doing is formulating a roadmap. So that would have to be improved by DOER. Or you might, at a future round, ask for assistance, and they would provide you assistance. But Northampton's already done a bunch of this already.
Does it apply only to municipal buildings or all buildings in Northampton, for example?
Municipal buildings.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep, that's a good question. Yes. You have to adopt the zero emission vehicle first policy. I'll go into that a little bit more later on, but it's a little twist on the high efficiency vehicle policy that you had to adopt to become a green community. And then you have to adopt the specialized stretch code, which both towns already have. Tom, you have another question? I see your hand out. Oh, and
yeah, I did. I was wondering, I got an email a couple days ago from CEC, Center for Energy Concert. Anyway, they were putting, thank you. No, it was CEC.
Clean
They
Energy
were,
Center.
yeah, they were
Massachusetts
putting
Clean
out a
Energy Center.
request, right? They were putting out a request for a program manager. Is that tied into this support that you said is now available as a climate leader community?
No, no.
Okay,
Yeah, Mass Clean Energy Center is a different different agency. It's a quasi-government agency.
okay. So
Therese?
where does the assistance or support from the state come from for the climate leader communities?
Well, it's not so much for the climate leader communities, and I'll get into grant. So maybe
Okay,
we
great.
should hold off
Yep,
on some questions because
yep,
I
good.
will be kind of touching on these as we go through. Therese?
I'm curious about the level of, I don't know, detail and measurable outcomes that is going to be preferred by DOER in the city, in the different cities' roadmaps. And I'm wondering if it's going to be a chance to kind of get some, you know, hard goals. Is that something that they'll want, or will it, is it, are you saying it's more general in that no real, you know, firm goals are required?
Well, I mean, the goal that would be required, and yeah, let me step a little bit. Let me just keep going here a bit.
Okay.
How about we hold the questions till the
Yeah.
end?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not quite working because I didn't realize that
Okay.
these
Sorry.
come out during the presentation. That's okay. All right. So whereas in the Green Communities Program, you became a green community, and then you have to show us once a year that you're maintaining all your commitments. The Climate Leaders Community is going to be, there's going to be a requirement to be recertified every 3 years. So what that means is demonstrate that you're meeting the certification requirements. In other words, if I go back here, you know, you still got the specialized stretch code, you're still using that. You haven't gone against your zero emission vehicle first policy, et cetera. You haven't, you know, shot down your decarbonization by 2050 policy. You know, so you're basically maintaining these things. We want you to update your decarbonization roadmap. So in a way that gets to your question a little bit, Adele, is that the roadmap isn't really necessarily here's where we want. That's the decarbonization commitments. By 2050, you want to stop burning fossil fuels in all municipal operations, is another way of putting that. So the decarbonization roadmap is kind of be a kind of evolving piece on how do you get there. It's more of a technical assistance piece. And then we will want you to have implemented one community engagement climate leader best practice. And this is the place where we want the towns to go away from focusing on municipal buildings and turn towards their community. It might be, so here's a bunch of examples. So it might be a clean energy and climate policy or planning. You might, you know, there might be some kind of forward-thinking policy or planning that you're implementing that could count. It could be some kind of community engagement, such as a Solarize program. That's a good example, but it could be youth outreach, education, implementation of some kind. So these are a whole bunch of examples I'm showing here, but DOER is going to be very open to ideas. This is something you can come and you can say, here's what we did in the last 3 years, and this is why we did it. And if you've got good ideas, particularly if you have ideas that have been tried and tested someplace else, whether it's Ohio or California, Eastern Mass, wherever, and you say, this is a program that seems to be working, we're going to do it here. We want to hear about it. But we are looking for things that you can help your community with. The last big column there is clean transportation and mobility. So again, you know, a lot of what Northampton and Amherst have been doing with complete streets and stuff, that would count as well.
Hi, Lori.
Okay, I lost you for a minute. You guys still there?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
We're still here, but we no longer can see your slides.
Okay, yeah, I think I seem to have. Here we go.
No.
Does that do it?
Yes, thank you.
Right. Okay, so as I was saying, here's the carrots. So right now, you guys can apply for the competitive grants through Green Communities, and that will stay, that will keep going. That's the first row up there, existing competitive grant applications. And you're limited to what you can apply for. You know, we kind of prescribe a whole bunch of stuff that you can apply for, but we limit it. We've never given out money in a competitive grant for a solar array on a community building. And there are other things that we haven't done. Or like at the moment, we're pulling back on LED streetlights, except for in schools and streetlights, or I mean LED lights, except for in schools and at streetlights. So if you become a climate leader community, we're going to allow that to get much broader. So you'll be able to apply for a broader range of things. Could be support for solar. Might even be something like a climate coordinator, or some kind of staff person or something. And then there's another pot of money. Do I remember where this pot of money is coming from? I don't, but anyhow, and it's sizable. But it's going to the Climate Leader Accelerator Grant. So we're talking about the big projects. We got $750,000 or more, 700,000 or above. So the first one, the competitive grants are really kind of helping you prepare your buildings for decarbonization, doing general energy efficiency, getting to smaller scale projects done. And then the accelerator grants are going to be for big projects that will be available just to climate leader communities. Okay, so some straw proposal ideas that we've got from the communities. When we were looking at this, we actually asked communities, what would you like? And these are some of the things they answered. It doesn't mean that these will definitely be what's out there, and it doesn't mean that there won't be more. So support for geothermal, support for on-site solar. Some of these I've already mentioned. Municipal building electrification and decarbonization, that's going to be a big one. If you have a climate leader best practice of some kind that you want some money for, you can get it through here. Okay. So this comes from Ashfield. And so the decarbonization commitment and roadmap, this is Ashfield's piece, defined as the elimination of all on-site burning of fossil fuels in municipal buildings and vehicles by 2050. That's really it. That's what we're aiming for. That's the big goal. By 2050, we don't want to be burning fossil fuels anymore in our municipal operations. And why we're doing that is it kind of fits into this general strategy the state's identifying. So kind of electrify everything, electrified buildings. As I mentioned before, with the example I gave, you're going to go away from even a high efficiency gas boiler to an air source heat pump or a heat pump of some kind. Electrified vehicles, so you stop burning, no combustion in the vehicle. And then clean up the grid. So this is where you start to ride on the coattails of the state, because you can do what you can to electrify, but you don't have too much control over just where your electricity comes from. You can buy RECs and stuff like that, but the state is committed to having the electric grid, I think, go down to like an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And then the last little bit will be through policies of carbon sequestration. And this is all in the Clean Energy and Climate Plan for 2030. So you can find all of this online, just their goal and how to clean up the grid and their carbon sequestration pieces. To give an example of how this works, right now, if you had a high efficiency gas boiler and you were comparing that to an electric cold climate heat pump, we're going to say an air source heat pump here. There's a comparison there is that with the current technology and the current emissions that we get from the grid, the heat pump would produce 45% less greenhouse gas emissions than your highest efficiency combustion product. So already, just by making the switch, you're reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, this is a kind of a rough drawing of what this state is planning for the greenhouse gas emissions from the electric grid dropping down. And you see by 2050, there is this bit that it still needs to go. That's the come on, late in the day, I guess. Carbon sequestration, thank you. Carbon sequestration will take over the rest of this. So we looked at this spot, if we're going to look at this spot in the graph, then the emissions from the cold climate heat pump have now dropped down to 18 MMBTU for to deliver one, the amount of carbon it takes, the emissions you're going to get from producing 1 MMBTU of heat is 85% less now. So that's kind of riding on the coattails. The decarbonization roadmap, as I said, is kind of very broad, but it's going to be really trying to focus on, how do you take a municipality's plans and merge them with your greenhouse gas reduction plans. So end of life of HVAC equipment, or building renovations, or roof replacements, or a building replacement. You're going to look for these triggering events to work for. And you're going to need to know that in advance, because it could be that you're going to need these boilers to be replaced, so you're going to aim for heat pumps there, but the building's going to need some prep in advance. So the roadmap should be able to kind of say, this building needs more insulation. It needs you to address its ventilation system, say, before you go to air source heat pumps. It's at that kind of a level. So you're going to, in the next 10 years, you're going to want your capital improvements program to be addressing these things. And then every 3 years, you kind of redo that. This is an example of what it might look like. Just kind of a very broad, regular energy checklists in there, new construction or major renovation project built in, when you're going to do these types of things. This isn't no one has come up with one of these plans yet. So, and we do have, the state has hired a few consultants to help communities come up with the roadmaps. So then moving on to the zero emission vehicles first policy. The idea here is, actually, this isn't it. Where is that policy? I'm going to jump to it, go out of order. So zero emission vehicle first policy. That would be you would adopt a policy that says, when you need a new vehicle, if there's a battery electric vehicle or a fuel cell electric vehicle available that could meet those needs, meet what the needs are of the community for that vehicle, then you're committing to buying that battery electric vehicle. If there's not a BEV available for that, you're going to look at a plug-in hybrid. If there's not a plug-in hybrid available, then you're going to look for a hybrid vehicle. And if there's not a hybrid vehicle, then you're back to just the most fuel-efficient internal combustion engine that you can get, which is similar to what you have for the Green Communities program at the moment. So that's it in a nutshell for the zero emissions vehicle policy. I think it'd be really easy for both Northampton and Amherst to adopt those. It seems like an easy piece. Oh yes, I guess I'm going back to the roadmap here. It again is kind of showing the same strategy that I mentioned before. Energy use intensity reduction. So that's your insulation, weatherization, dealing with your ventilation systems, energy recovery ventilation, that type of thing. Keep working that over the decades to 2050. Then the zero emission vehicle, light duty vehicles and the heavy duty fleets. You can see that we're expecting the light duty vehicles to be replaced at a faster rate. This is actually a rate of vehicle replacement, not a use of energy. So 5% of your vehicles by 2027 should be zero, meet this zero emission vehicle policy. 20% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Heavy duty vehicles, we're giving you more time. And I will say, the climate leaders community is a way of acknowledging a community when they are being leaders. And it's a way of actually asking a community really to take kind of take a leap. Because, you know, these vehicles for heavy duty vehicles is a good example. They're not out there yet. And when they first come out, we don't know how expensive they're going to be. We're not asking a community to break the bank. And we're not going to expect a community to make a change over to something when the technology is not there yet. But we're asking the community to make that commitment that they're going to be looking at it and they're going to be, you know, with grants. We're assuming there's going to be grants available. We're assuming there's still going to be state and federal assistance available. If that simply doesn't materialize, which I would be highly surprised if it doesn't, then it's going to be really hard for a municipality to follow this. And there's not going to be any, you know, punishment for that. But we're really asking the community to take a leap because this is in the future. We really don't know it's going to be here. We don't know the subsidy is going to be here, but you're expecting them to. And by making the leap, you're actually kind of causing it to happen. And then reduce emissions from on-site fossil fuels. That's the last piece, whereas you've electrified and the state reduces the greenhouse gas emissions from the electric grid, then those emissions will drop down. It says up 100%. Total emission reduction goals about 95%. So this chart kind of shows you the idea of where we're aiming for. Okay, so someone was asking about the assistance available. This is, like I said, we've hired 2 contractors who are going to be providing assistance to a number of towns on developing a roadmap. And some of these are going to be kind of a desktop analysis if they've got enough information from the community. So if you've got up-to-date building information, the levels of insulation, kind of number of windows, HVAC systems that are installed, their age, what kind of condition they're in, then they'll be able to do kind of a desktop analysis. If you don't have that information, you don't have the capacity to get that information because you're a small town, you don't have the staff for it, then option number 2, these consultants would actually go out and do some legwork and find this information for you. The roadmaps must include all school buildings and account for at least 75% of the community's total building emissions. I suspect if you're doing all school buildings, that almost defines over at least 75% of most communities' total building emissions. Okay, went over the zero emission vehicles policy. And the last one would be the opt-in specialized code, which I don't think I need to go over unless someone has any questions on it. That's my slideshow.
Wow. Love.
Yes, Darcy.
I have a question about the meeting the stopping the burning of fossil fuels goal by 2050. If a community has already, like Amherst does, has a goal of carbon neutrality by 2050, does that qualify or do they have to redo it?
So that would have to be a conversation with us. What was your goal again by 2050? Carbon neutrality.
Right. So that
Right.
doesn't mean that you stop burning fossil fuels necessarily.
Oh, it might. I mean, how else would you get there?
I guess by counting carbon sequestration or by offsets or that kind
Yeah,
of
so
thing.
I guess I'm answering my own question here. So maybe it's, you still got an oil boiler, and yet you're buying enough carbon offsets from, wind plants in Texas. I mean, I guess that could qualify as carbon neutrality. And I'm not sure if that would count in this case, because I think this, green highlighted piece really kind of sums it up. We really want to eliminate on-site burning of fossil fuels. So if carbon neutrality means that, and you can kind of show us that in your policy plan, your adopted master plan, then we could probably be convinced to accept it. I think that's going to be a conversation with the DOER.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oops, something just got in the way of, there we go, Adele. Or should someone else be calling out the,
So my question is, what about non-municipal buildings? And could that be considered part of community engagement if non-municipal buildings got decarbonized?
it certainly would count as far as the, the outreach part, the climate leaders' best practices. That certainly would count as part of something like that. Are you thinking that if it's easier to decarbonize some private buildings, and if the municipality pays for that or something, that they get to offset their carbon that they're, still producing in some of their old buildings that are hard to decarbonize?
No, Local Energy Advocates is working with the Housing Authority in Northampton to reduce their energy use intensity in their buildings, but those are not municipal buildings.
Right. No, that wouldn't count towards, I mean, they wouldn't be included in the municipal decarbonization. Because that is really for municipal operations, is what we're aiming it for. Because we actually think that, municipalities don't have control over private buildings. If they don't own the buildings, they can't, it gets really hard to try to make that commitment when you don't own the building. Then you have to kind of go through incentives, et cetera.
So how would we guarantee that we would be carbon neutral or whatever by 2050 if we're not going to touch private buildings?
So for this case, the Climate Leaders Communities Program, the commitment is just carbon neutral for municipal buildings operations. Yeah. I mean, the state has a larger goal, and their strategy of electrification and then reducing the greenhouse gases from production of electricity. That is their kind of large strategy that they're aiming for. But we're not going to put that strategy on the backs of the municipalities and say, you're the ones that have to do this. We're asking you to do your piece through this program.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Tom? And if anybody else sees other hands up, I'm not sure if I can see everybody, so I might not see a hand raised.
Okay.
Pamela had her hand up as well. But anyway,
Kelly?
are there any municipalities that are using the service of those consultants yet to develop their roadmap?
They have been selected. I'd have to look them up. Yeah, I don't have.
If you could shoot that to us later, just a point of interest, what communities are that far along that they're selected in.
Yeah, so they applied for the application and they've been awarded it, but that program's not up and running yet. It should be over the next month or so that the consultants will actually start work.
Okay.
But certain communities applied, and a certain number of them were adopted. And we also know that we're going to do this again because this is just the first time out there.
So is there a limit right now that's been filled, and then you're going to look? We should look toward another deadline, and what would that deadline be?
Yes, I'm not sure if the limit is the right word for it. It was, the program opportunity notice went out, and a certain number of communities applied, and one was turned down only because they didn't fulfill all the requirements of the pond. Actually, it was probably a really good community, and it's too bad they didn't get qualified. So as far as I know, we're not anywhere near a limit. It's more the number of communities that responded was the limit. And will this come out? Well, it won't be more than a year. Will we be in the same position in a year, or will it be 6 months? I'm not sure. We haven't made up our minds yet on that. For to become, I should have brought this out. become a climate leaders communities, there will be a period of time where you can put your applications in, where you can just basically submit all your documentation saying we've met all these criteria. And that's going to happen twice a year, in July and December. So there will be a period where it opens up and you can put your applications in.
Okay.
And
That
so,
answers, yeah, that helps. Yeah.
yeah. Pam. I see you have your hand raised.
But you're muted, Pam.
Ah,
Maybe we can move on to Lori while Pam is figuring out how to unmute.
great.
I was just gonna say that I think I found the announcement of the first awards, and it looks like it's Newbury, Peabody, Layden, and Gosnold, which I don't know at all. If I'm reading this right, April
No, I don't
2024.
Yeah, I think,
Oh, no, those are green communities. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
those are
They're
new
not
green
climate
communities, right?
Those
Yes,
are not climate leaders. Never mind.
right.
I was looking to see if I could find them because I'm curious to see who got them and who was and
You
who
know, if I could,
applied.
if you guys are okay if I stop sharing,
Yeah.
Mhm.
okay. Then give me a moment and
Mhm.
and let's see. Oh, I should have remembered this. Okay, so in Western Mass, it's Amherst, Ashfield, and Stockbridge.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering because I thought we had put in an application, but
Okay.
when was it announced?
You know, I'm not sure if it's been publicly announced.
Ah, okay.
It is just happened fairly like a week ago or so.
Could
So the
be.
communities were made aware, but I'm not sure if it's had a public announcement yet. And it may not. This may not be something that they, it's kind of more like just a process along the way.
Could you repeat the communities in Western Mass that were selected?
Amherst,
Amherst, yeah,
Ashfield,
Ashfield.
and Stockbridge.
Thank you.
And if you'd like, I could go through the rest of them too. It's another
Sure.
17 communities. So Natick, Melrose, Newburyport, Somerville, Arlington, Needham, Framingham, Westboro, Mills, someone I don't even know. Wayland, Wakefield, Chelmsford, Medford, Salem, Stowe, Worcester, and Truro.
Great.
Yeah. So Lori, did you have a question?
No, I was just trying to figure out who was
Oh, gotcha.
awarded the
Okay.
first round. Thanks.
How about Pam?
Pam, can you unmute?
There
Oh,
seems to be no allowance for natural solutions to lower greenhouse gas, such as that. Okay, she's put something in the chat.
so that would be carbon sequestration and by forestry, for example.
Yes. That is not part of the municipal operations, the municipal, the climate leaders program. It could be. That could certainly be something that you do as your climate leaders, climate best practices. That you are preserving forests or whatever, in order to capture carbon. But Pam, it should be in the state's climate reduction and energy CLCP plan, their 30-year plan for carbon reduction, or by 2030. It should be in there, what they're going to be doing for that.
Tina has a question.
Okay, Tina.
Hi, thanks for that interesting slides. I was just wondering two ideas that would they qualify, and one would be to get people in the community signed up for, to kind of keep track of people in the community and get them signed up for heat pumps and stuff like that.
Yeah, kind of like playing a solar coach of some kind.
Yeah, I mean, I know is new municipal buildings, but for the part where you're trying to do something else with the community, is that the type of thing?
Sure. Yes.
Mhm.
That's very similar to, say, a solarized program or a heat smart program.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that popped into mind was like alternative cement. If your community wants to demonstrate using that, is that in the realm?
I'm not quite picturing how that would be. I mean, if you wanted to use it, say, in new construction. Um,
Skate park or something?
oh yeah. So, captured carbon in the built environment isn't yet in any of the state's building codes, nor is it required in any way. So I'm not quite sure how it's going to fit in. But if someone, said they were going to do that in order to capture carbon as part of a decarbonization project, you could certainly bring it to us to talk to about that. As you know, you're going to have a wide latitude for that outward facing climate leader best practices piece. So that could be something like that. We definitely would want to hear that kind of an idea. Okay, now we have Lori's got another hand up.
Yeah, I can just make a comment that most of the schemes, I actually did some research into this a while ago as part of a policy proposal I put into the fellowship policy fellow program for scientists. Didn't quite get it, but I came in second. Would have put me in the White House, would have been nice. But would have been nice, but no. Any rate, the practical methods for carbon sequestration require mines or large bodies of water, or you're not going to do anything significant in a building, in a municipal building. You might be able to make a dent if you stop what's it called, harvesting forests every 60 years, which is what we do in Massachusetts. And 60 years is the magic number. It's about the time they finally become good carbon sinks. We harvest them. So that is the best possible way you could probably do something in Massachusetts just by conserving land, but it's still not, there's a limited amount of land. Carbon sequestration is necessary, but it's not going to be the sort of thing I think that a municipality can do by itself.
Yeah, it could be.
Like greening the grid, only bigger.
If you made it part of your building code, the state's building.
If you
then you might get to that level. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chris. We can, will it be okay with you if we send questions to you as they arise?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. And I assume that we will have access to your slides other than the recording. Will you send us your slides?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, make a note of that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Best of luck keeping this going elsewhere.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, nice to see you, Chris.
Yes, absolutely, Sharon. All righty.
Night.
Thank you.